Okay, right. Okay then. Well, I'll just briefly go again. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming for our Q&A session. I'm going to pass over to our moderators, Stephen and Dave Lorry of, I explained before. And on our panel, our first panel, we have Mark Jennings and David Ward. We have Lee Ward. John Garforth, otherwise known as Lee Garforth of the IOL. Dr. Lee Galvin, otherwise known as Mike Galvin. And I think that joke's not fallen flat, so we'll forget about that. Des Brosser and Paul Elliott of the DFT. Ladies and gentlemen, let me pass you on to Stephen and David Lorry.
Thank you. So what we're going to do is we're going to take things slightly differently this time, because what we normally do is we ask the panel to give a brief overview of their expertise, and by the time we've done that, there isn't any time left for question and answers. So what we want to do is we want to give you more of an opportunity, more time to ask questions of the specialists that are on the panel. Okay? So Lee Ward and Mark Jennings, they've done a lot of articles. It was that detailed. They've done that much research into it that it was spread over a 3-month period through the PHTM, all about cross-border hiring and the legislation. Okay? We've got the Institute of Licensing here. There's upcoming changes with the Department for Transport. So I'm going to hand over to the panel, let them introduce themselves directly, and then we'll throw it open to you for questions and answers. Okay?
Lee Ward, cross-border hiring in Oldham.
Paul Elliott, I'm a policy advisor at Department for Transport.
Des Brosser, National Director with EASU, Safeguarding and Licensing.
Mike Galvin. These days I'm a consultant, but prior to that I ran a couple of the market leaders in the taxi and private hire markets.
Thank you. John Garforth, I'm the Vice Chairman of the Institute of Licensing, and I'm also a local authority licensing manager.
Mark Jennings, cross-border hiring. I'm also I run a cooperative cab company.
Okay, so on the agenda, you've got minimum licensing standards and suitability policies. You've got licensing delays, which are creating problems, drivers getting licenses, vehicles getting licensed, which was made worse through COVID, of course, because a lot of licensing authorities closed. You've got driver shortages, which again is down to delays of licensing authorities, cross-border hiring, driver safety, and in-vehicle CCTV and tinted window policies. So we know that you have concerns, you have issues, so let's hear from you. What is it you want to ask? Anybody? I'll go down with the microphone.
Thank you. I don't want to be too controversial or sort of name actual licensing authorities, but we've got a little bit of an issue within our own licensing authority on the grounds that I realise it is our taxpayers' money that funds our local authority. And we've got a bit of an issue that we would expect them to actually work to best business practice. So little things like the licensing authority should be able to send out a group email, whether there's one person is off or not. So we actually raised these issues and we were told that they are not an emergency service, which we realised, but some of our questions are actually time sensitive. If we want to buy a vehicle, we want to know whether it will fit the licensing rules, etc. And I think that any local authority should be able to send out an email from its own department, and it shouldn't all be down with one person. So that's a little bit of an issue with us. And also, when we've gone to them with a conditionality, which we've said has come from the Institute of Licensing, they won't listen to us because we're just taxi drivers and they're not prepared to actually look at the information we provided.
Okay, and which council's this?
We're actually allowed to name that one. It's from down in Torbay.
Torbay Council.
And even with the DBSs, we've been saying to them, we've been doing this now for 10 years, and we've been doing it very successfully for drivers without putting any extra profit on it. And yet it's really hard to make one person within the licensing authority actually listen to us and take us seriously, because we're just seen as being just a taxi driver. And how we want to know how we can actually help to build that relationship to work with them.
Mark?
We're fighting a bias.
Basically, thank you. you basically form an association. The association applies to the council, and that, as soon as that's recognised, the council has to listen to you.
We have actually got an association that was there previously. I was elected as their secretary and was very forcibly told off for daring to talk to drivers. They are actually working quite closely with the licensing officer. We have now done that with the help of David and the MPHTO. We've actually formed an association. We've done it legitimately. We are licensed. We do HMRC. We've done the ICO.
Is the association recognised by your council?
Our
officially?
council are choosing, when we've gone to licensing committee, we put in a really good submission on behalf of the six-seaters, which we actually did manage to get it back onto our acceptable list. And yet he turned round and he only ever names the other association who will not challenge. When we don't want to be awkward, we don't want to make life difficult, but some things we need to challenge and we need to do it, and we want to find out a way to work with the licensing authority.
They need to accept your association as recognised as soon as it's recognised, or join a union, and the union's already recognised, and they can't stop that.
Yeah.
That's another route in.
But I would have thought any department should be able to send out a group email.
They are very awkward, I'll be honest with you. They will only recognise, from my councils I work with, will only recognise associations or unions, find out what they are. If they don't recognise a new one, join the one that's already recognised and you wear that hat. What matter, what hat you wear doesn't matter as long as you're wearing a hat that's recognised, and use that.
Well, the Regulators Code requires the local authority to engage with every trade representative.
Yes.
So, and they can't choose who they engage with. They have to engage with anyone who's representing the trade. And my experience is that the only real way you're going to improve your relationship with your local authority is to win in court, to take a battle to court, win, and then they will realise then that they're on the same level as you and they're not above you. And again, if they read the Regulators Code, they will realise that their role is to support you, not to be your overlords.
Okay, just a minute, John.
Just a couple of supportive comments here for you. The whole of the country is opened up to dealing with the general public. Many local authorities haven't. Last week I rang
John,
one of the largest authorities in the Midlands.
Microphone up. Can't hear it.
Can you hear me now?
No, near your mouth.
Speak into the mic.
Yeah. I rang one of the largest authorities in the country, and the answer phone came on and said, "I'm sorry, we can't take calls at the moment because of COVID." Full stop. What concerns me is that a lot of the funding that drivers put into councils, you will notice that services are becoming conjoined, and that is to save the council money, and they're absorbing money in many cases from the taxi and private hire funding to supplement other services. And it's entirely wrong, and they need to be accountable for it. They've been held accountable on so many occasions, but need to be more accountable now. Another point is that the industry is crying out for new drivers, and the councils hold on to, we're going to do everything. You set your standards and you find trusted bodies who can do that training and assessment for you. Not online anonymously, but do it. You set your standards through the councils and get the body that will do it and get these numbers moving. People complained about Wolverhampton and one or two other authorities, but they're getting the drivers through, and in my view, they're getting them through safely.
Okay, quickly, John, and then I want to move on to a different topic because we've got people on the panel here.
Just very quickly on your trade engagement. I'm not sure if you've tried speaking and asking for a separate meeting with your chair of licensing or the relevant cabinet member, but that might be a worthwhile way forward as well, or even speaking to the contacting the chief executive if you've not tried that equally. Yeah.
This guy's got a question.
Right.
Oh, she's still talking.
That's right.
Right. Yep.
Yeah, afternoon. In Southampton, they decided to go, when it comes to consultation with the trade, they've decided to go with elections for drivers, 3 private hire, 3 from the Hackney Group, which is fine, and they do that in Eastleigh, and the drivers all send in emails to vote for the relevant drivers. In Southampton, they decided to go to an electoral reform and a company called Civica, £8,500, the election cost. Now, that's coming out of our funds. Now, over the years, it's been a bit of a beauty contest. There's guys who want to be, get their name seen as a trade rep. It's died down now, so they don't even have elections. There's only one guy putting themselves forward for each position. We've raised this issue. There must be another way of doing it. We've come up with another format where they could do actually a vote in front of the trade. To us, it just seems a waste of our funds. It could go elsewhere instead of going to that extortionate cost.
So your council are paying to run an election for you to decide who's going to be the chair of your resort? Hang on, what?
That's not legal, is it,
No.
David? Your fees only cover the cost of your licensing and enforcement. They can't cover anything else.
And they
That's got to
can't-
come from the taxpayer.
Yeah, they can't do that at all. Because, as Stephen says, the cost of your keys, is your licences, is just for the issue and enforcement. They can't start divvying it about and doing whatever they want with it. There is a thing called the Local Government Miscellaneous Provisions Act. That stipulates what they can use your funds for. And it's not for electing the chairs of your associations. That's nothing to do with the council.
It's not chairs of associations, it's trade reps to meet with the council.
No. The chairs of your associations are the people that meet with your council. Regulators' Code states they must.
I'm a union rep, I get invited.
Yeah.
But that's the way they're doing it.
But Stephen, Regulators' Code says they must engage with anybody, doesn't it?
It does, yes. I can't remember which section, but yeah, it clearly says in there they have to engage with trade representatives and anybody that they appoint.
Yeah, section 2.11.
Oh, thank you.
Right, anybody got any questions on cross-border hiring? Because I know that's very much a hot topic, and we've got Lee and Mark here to discuss that. They've written a lot of articles on it. They've done a lot of research, so I'd like you to experience on their benefits and expertise.
Well, I'd like to begin with one question, actually.
Go on.
Get the ball rolling. Does the Deregulation Act enable or make legal cross-border hiring?
No, it doesn't. Is this on? Yeah. No, it doesn't. All it's done is modify the 76 Act, because before, an operator could accept a booking in its area and then subcontract that to another operator within the same area. The Deregulation Act now allows an operator to subcontract a booking to an operator in its other area, in another area. The neighbouring area, the other side of the country, that doesn't matter. That's the only thing that it did. It didn't replace anything in the 76 Act, it added to it. Now, what the abuse is there is they're not arguing the other parts of the Act where a vehicle can make itself available. So we'll use Wolverhampton because it's already been mentioned, but up in Liverpool, an operator's got an operator's licence in Liverpool and Wolverhampton, miles apart. They take the booking up in Liverpool, subcontract to Wolverhampton, but the Wolverhampton vehicle that it's then given to is actually sat waiting to cover work in Liverpool. That is what we believe is where it all breaks down. A vehicle can absolutely pass through, pick up or drop off in any area in the UK. What it cannot do is, once it's done that, is make itself available to accept a job, unless it's back in its own area. Well, there is absolutely no point in 300 and odd areas having their own individual licensing authority. It would have been one national licence, and we definitely don't have that. Now, we've had mentioned that Wolverhampton are absolutely brilliant because they've streamlined the process. Well, I disagree with that, because what they're not doing, you're lucky I didn't look at you a different way, what they're not doing is actually controlling those vehicles. They've given them a licence and let them go anywhere. They do nothing whatsoever to go out and monitor these drivers and vehicles. They have no idea if it's actually a licensed driver working in that licensed vehicle, because they do not stop and check. And as we all know, when it's in a different authority, they can't stop and check to see if everything's legitimate. In Milton Keynes.
Lee, do you have any evidence?
I could eat, but you could stop me now in my car, and I could just say to you, it's none of your business, mate, and drive away. You could look at anything you want.
Yeah,
what
you
I'm
could look at
saying
the
is
badge.
I can legally drive away. The point is, you might be doing something right. I'm not saying it might be 100% right, but at least you are trying. There is so many other authorities that do not. So I'm not being argumentative here on this. I'm applauding you. But the fact of the matter is, there is... Tell me a place where there isn't one. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, just to come back on the Deregulation Act, Milton Keynes Council versus Skyline Taxis 2017. Yeah. We challenged that, and the High Court struck us down and said that the South Northants vehicle could go and pick up a job, even though the person rang Milton Keynes Skyline, because Skyline had a license in South Northants, even though the job never got transferred to South Northants, even though they had an office there but nobody was there. The High Court said that was fine as long as they had a license, because everything's done in the cloud.
I was at that appeal.
So
I was sat in the gallery at that appeal.
Yeah, well, hang on a sec.
I can tell you verbatim.
Yeah, well, it was our case. It was our case. So we do know it pretty well.
Yep.
And we got struck down at the mags. He wouldn't even listen. He wouldn't even go to the other side. Struck it out, and the High Court struck us out as well. And we had Sarah Clover representing us. So we tried, because we've got cross-border hiring problems in Milton Keynes. And Wolverhampton at the moment have definitely moved into Milton Keynes.
Okay, can I just jump in on that? Because as I say, I was at that appeal. I was sitting in the gallery in Birmingham that day. And unfortunately, where Mr. Socky presented that evidence to say that job was transferred to the operating centre in South Northamptonshire, you know as well as I do that the typeface on that evidence was different to the actual typeface that on the thing. It looked like it had been added, but they couldn't prove it. And the Justice Hickinbottom actually said, unless you can prove it, that is taken as evidence that is correct. That is what they've done. They've subcontracted that job legally, even though your officers turned up in South Northamptonshire in his brother's house, and his brother said the computer's over there and it's never turned on. I'm correct, aren't I? Yes, okay, because this is exactly what happened. This is what was said at that case. What you didn't, and I talked to your officers on the way down in that lift from that thing, is you never ever, unfortunately, questioned where the South Northamptonshire operator was operating, because the job was accepted in Milton Keynes by a South Northamptonshire driver. That question was never asked in that court. And if that question had been asked in that court, I can guarantee Justice Hickinbottom would have said it exactly how it should have been. Unfortunately, that was the problem with that case.
Well, we're stuck with the case.
Yes.
The case is clear that the job doesn't have to go from Milton Keynes to South Northants, or South Northants driver. It can stay in Milton Keynes because they have an operator license. That's the point.
That wasn't argued at all in that case.
That wasn't argued.
Sorry, but not at all was that argued. And that's why so many people rely on that case, even though where the vehicle... I've listened to you, so listen to me a second. With due respect, I'm not in your office, we're in a meeting with everybody else listening. But what I'm saying to you is... we were. We were, until he's saying that that case fell, so everybody has to adhere to it. At no point in that case was it argued where that vehicle was. Neither was it in Reading versus Alley. So the two cases never argued where that vehicle was when it was given the job.
Yeah, we know.
Right, so it made itself available in Milton Keynes. It was, but that point was never argued in court. And the second, unfortunately, it's not. Well, yeah, it is, but it isn't, because everybody now says Skyline versus Milton Keynes or Reading versus Alley. The argument we've put forward has never been argued in court, and there isn't one.
Yes.
Absolutely, it does. 100%. We're back on. We're back. I like you now. But what I'm saying to you is, the fact of the matter is, there is also not one system out there that I'm aware of that when it subcontracts that booking, the driver isn't involved in it at some point. Right? There's no magical system. It doesn't say, driver in Milton Keynes, I can't find anybody available for that. I'll swap it over to which other operator it's going to use and let one of them drivers have a shot at it. It doesn't. It leaves it in limbo between the two. To me, you could then argue and say, well, Milton Keynes is directly operating a vehicle from another area. So there's still lots of arguments. It's just, unfortunately, officers tend not to listen to us area horse drivers.
It's up to another council, like I said earlier about legal challenge, it's up to another council to look at maybe the things that went wrong with our case and challenge it again. That's not happening, is it?
Well, there's what's the authority that's asked for everybody to chip in?
Guildford, Mike
Guildford.
Smith.
Guildford's asked everybody to chip in, all the authorities. Instead of one authority having 100 grand bill, everybody chuck a grand in.
Are you talking about judicial review?
No, he's talking about declaration. And
Criminal case.
yes, that's right.
Everyone chipping in sounds like a judicial review.
Mike Smith at Guildford, who's the chief licensing officer, sent out an email to every licensing authority in the country, and he was asking exactly that. Can we all chip in for declaration on the Act of where the vehicle has to be, where someone can operate? And an operator is very simple. An operator can operate, i.e. give a job to a driver, only in the licence authority that he's licensed for. He cannot give it once it's gone across that border. He cannot give it to another vehicle that's licensed in another authority. And it's as simple as that. It's very, very clear.
Well,
Okay,
we've got
all
the
right.
advisors at the Department for Transport. Could you not get an answer to this argument?
It's for the courts to interpret the law.
But you could go to court and ask for a ruling on the law, can't you?
We don't see the need at the moment. If authorities want to take that challenge, they can.
So basically the 300,000 licensed individual sole traders are suffering for a handful of large operators in this country that are just out to swamp their areas with vehicles from every area, so they get their little cut, while those drivers are trying to make a living.
That's true.
Off actually out there earning and running their own vehicles. This is the problem. We've literally, you're looking after, you're putting a yacht for a handful of operators, but you're committing, I could only say it as financial genocide on 300,000 drivers, where some of them have actually taken their lives because of how difficult it is out there. That's the problem we've got.
I totally agree with that.
That'll become increasingly bad.
Well, you will do, because you support Visa. It's a large company.
Just a second. I'm asking this gentleman down here to be quiet whilst he's talking. Just a second, please. Let's just correct something. I said nothing about Wolverhampton being marvellous. So don't misquote, please.
Can I say something about Wolverhampton, please? I'm based in Shropshire, and we've got a nightmare with Wolverhampton drivers because they're right next door to us, and it's been absolute nightmare since Wolverhampton started operating, well, go-karts or whatever in Shropshire, and they're going through no entry signs. A lot of their drivers don't know which side, wrong side of the road. They've had loads of accidents. We had an accident last week. Go-karts driver hit somebody. It's Wolverhampton-based, and other thing is applying for hire. There's no action taken, and they're parked everywhere, so train stations, nightclubs, just taking jobs, unbooked jobs. They don't care, They don't actually care anything about licensing officers or whatever, because nobody comes out to do enforcement. Well, it's an absolute nightmare in Shropshire.
That's the point
Telford
Lee
and
was
Shropshire,
making
it's
earlier.
a nightmare.
Yeah,
This needs to be stopped, to be honest with this.
That's the actual point Lee was
Absolute
making
nightmare,
earlier.
because we've been hit hard.
Yeah.
Probably the hardest hit authority in the country, because they're right next door. The majority now drivers that can't get a badge in Shropshire or Telford, they go to Wolverhampton. I've known loads of drivers that can't get a badge for various reasons or whatever, and they're going to Wolverhampton and got a badge. They shouldn't be on the road.
Well, this goes back to, if you read that article that me and Lee did, it went in the Private Hire Taxi Monthly. It starts off in Plymouth in 1974 in June. And this Public Protection Committee sat down and they had a massive problem with hire cars. They're just doing what they like, running riot. And we have gone full circle. History is repeating itself. We've gone back to June 1974. And we've just got a load of licensed drivers now, who can literally go, because they know they're not going to get stopped, they're not going to get, unless you go to Milton Keynes, of course, chances of getting caught or chances of getting stopped are slim and none. We've done, on the end of that article, we did, how many people did we FOI to see if they've actually done any enforcement? If you look at the article, right at the end, it's got this grid of all these FOIs. Have you done any enforcement whatsoever? And the results are devastating. They've done none. So you're suffering, I'm suffering, Lee's suffering, 350,000 other licensed drivers around the country are suffering because, you know, and I will use Wolverhampton because they were mentioned in the latest bill going through Parliament. God knows how many times they mentioned that bill. That's also in the article. We have returned to the Wild West. This is exactly what we have returned to. There's no control. Our districts are called controlled districts for a reason. So the local authority, under the Local Miscellaneous Provisions Act, has control over its area. They have lost control. There is no enforcement. It hasn't ever since 2015, when Uber, let's call them what they are, absolutely run riot across the entire country with TfL cars. Go and get your licence at TfL, and they easily licensed hundreds and thousands of drivers, and they went everywhere across the country as far north as Berwick-upon-Tweed, probably, with a little green roundel in their window, and it's not got any better. And our licence authorities, and I'm sorry guys, but you know the IOL have been no help on this. NALIO have been no help on this, and it's just getting worse and worse and worse. We've gone back so far. We've been through the Hansards, we've been through the committee reports leading up to the bill becoming Parliament. We've been to every single court case going. I quoted you what the justices said at that court case to prove that I was there, and we've done all this work just to sit here and go, well, you know, it's okay. Oh, well, there's nothing we can do. We're being lied to. It's as simple as that. We're being lied to.
What about there's a democratic deficit that's not been mentioned as well. I'll make this point quickly, and then we're going to need to move on to another subject. What rights have the people, the citizens of Wolverhampton, through the people they elect, have to determine licensing policy throughout the country? The people in Derby, Southampton, Manchester, they have no say. That's not right, is it?
Okay, so we've got a couple more, actually we've got three more, but I want to wind down this topic because we've got Paul here from the DFT. I want to touch very briefly on the consultation that's running right now, which is shortly due to expire. It's quite a lengthy document, but it is urgent and vital that you all respond to that consultation. So I want to come on to Paul. We've got Mike here as well. We've got Des, and we've got John here from the IOL as well, which we're hoping to get onto all of those subjects. But of course, as you can sense in the room, cross-border hiring is an extremely hot topic, and it isn't going anywhere anytime soon. So I'm going to pass on very, very quickly. Please keep your questions brief and short, and then we can get you some answers and move on.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. Yeah, first of all, may I just congratulate Mark and Lee for that excellent three-part series. What you've mentioned, Steve and Dave, about the Regulators Code, everybody needs to be aware of this Regulators Code because it is a code that we could all work with. Paul, I'm sorry, I've got to ask a question for you. The guidance, DFT guidance document 2020 approved on private hire vehicles, you know, to make sure that it is a private hire vehicle, that it's got all the proper details on it. Now, when we read the 28th of March DFT document, page 40, which I believe is chapter 8, you seem to be agreeing that private hire vehicles can advertise for anybody or everybody. I was just wondering, what is your views on that, Paul? Sorry to put you in this situation.
I don't know the bit that you're referring to in the statutory standards, and as far as I'm aware, the best practice guidance doesn't say that a private hire vehicle can advertise. What we're trying to do is what we're proposing, because it is a consultation, is to try and make it more obvious to the public what is a taxi and what is a private hire vehicle, so that private hire vehicles aren't approached to us to take them for immediate hire. Passengers, when they have made that booking, they should be given details so they can identify the private hire vehicle that is fulfilling that booking. And we want to try and separate the two out in the public perception.
Do you think that there is a need for the public to be aware of the difference, or should the onus be left to the driver? Because from our experience, the travelling public, especially vulnerable women, for example, if they see a sign on the side of a vehicle that says, be booked, be insured, they don't think, oh, I can't get in that because I've not booked it. They think, oh, he's a licensed driver. If I talk to him nicely, he'll take me home. That's the message they get when they see that sign, not what it says, not what's written. The implication is different from the inference in that what's written is not what the person understands. When they're vulnerable, they've had a bit too much to drink and they want to get home. My view personally is that the onus should actually be on the driver to ensure that they are not picking up passengers that are not booked. They're not making themselves available for that. I don't think there is any merit, my view, in drawing that distinction from for the public to make, because they won't make it. Even the most intelligent members of the public won't make it. It won't happen.
I would encourage you absolutely, and I hope you have, to respond to the consultation. The idea is that we want to, as I say, separate the two trades out in the public perception. And if you think having a sign on the door that says pre-booked only doesn't help with that differentiation, then please suggest the alternative.
Hearts and Minds campaign. Educate the public. We already know what we're licensed to do and not do. So educate the public with an Hearts and Minds campaign. The problem with no signage on the side of that car, in my honest opinion, is that you will get drivers, or you actually giving the option for drivers to multi-platform, which is great for some drivers, not so much for others, because when it's quiet, they all nest on one firm. When it's busy, they'll all go onto an app firm that doesn't care where you're working. But if you want to talk about a safety aspect of it, one of the reasons, and I don't agree with all the argument about this, but I will use it, one of the reasons in Rotherham that taxis were identified is because they had signage on the side of their car when they were picking people up that they shouldn't have been doing and transporting them round. You remove that signage, that car just becomes another car that the public would identify as another car. The plate on the back isn't enough to identify it. Wolverhampton cars has phone numbers on the side to whatever area they're working in there. But this is the problem, they're not regulated by the people that give them the licence. You are going to cause more trouble by not understanding the trade, by removing signage, than what you will, than what you're trying to achieve.
Then please complete the consultation and all those responses are considered.
I take your point actually about the consultation, because let's look at the way all the acts come into. There's one which was referred to very early on, which hasn't been mentioned, is an act which got nothing to do with taxis, which is about trading standards and customers able to make choice. And that reflected on some of the court decisions and what you've mentioned politically, where customers should have choice. Anything that's restrictive, and probably the taxis are one of the last restrictive trades that we have, has been annihilated in all other walks of life. But if we go back or move forward, the trade has moved in. We've got hubs operating across 3 districts. We have got, it's been passed, we can move bookings to call centres. So where are they? India, wherever it is. The trade's moved on. The taxi trade is in, if we talk taxis, is in tremendous decline in most areas. Even in London, we're now down to just over 13,000 licensed taxis. We've still got 80,000 private hire minicabs in London. Whether we like it or not, everything has gone booking-wise, whether we like it, or app-wise, is going to go. The problem also, which hasn't helped with the licensing, putting recommendations through, which the Department of Transport have put out as an option to councils, has taken powers away from councils to make decisions if they adopt them. So in other words, you have licensing officers which will make decisions. But because we've still got every licensing office making different decisions, you've got no standard. And we go back to the consulting in 2014, the recommendation was to have a standard license. At this present moment, with all the talking about licensing, and I know you've done an awful lot of work on cross-bordering, I'm not disagreeing with it, but the interaction of where we are now is, if we look at practicalities, licensing officers don't understand, the public don't understand. I represented the trade many times. I have very few people that I've actually met that actually understand the full ramifications of licensing. It is an absolute mess. And the public, you turn around saying, we need to get the public on board. Well, the drivers don't understand many of the rules and regulations. It's made 10 times worse with the regulations. When I started, our licensing was eight sheets of rules. Now, with the latest ones with the Institutes of Licensing, when our licensing districts are going to be updated, we are going to be on about 120 pages. We are talking, and the type of people that are working are not flipping what I call graduates. We've got a real problem. And of course, the thing about it, even what I've said, you haven't got a hope in hell getting counsellors who are sitting at a meeting for 15 minutes maybe, like it happened in passing the Institute of Guidelines. In 15 minutes they passed that in our council, without actually realising that they'd taken a lot of the powers away from the council and given it to the officers.
1 second, Peter. Your council was actually less than 15 minutes because Cheryl signed it off with Stephen in a heartbeat. It wasn't even a meeting when the IOL regulations were brought in like your council. That's perfectly true. Yes, it is.
Cheryl did sign it off. That was they were advisory. When they signed it off and made it part of the conditions, it was held at a meeting, and that was... She signed that off as well? No, she signed it off originally as advisory. The advisory conditions were a nightmare.
Can I just ask, do you know when it was just 8 pages? When it was just 8 pages long, everybody understood it?
Well,
yeah,
I think a lot of people understood the 8 pages as far as that's I'm not saying that it hadn't needed to be expanded.
No.
It had to be
as long as they understood it.
But
then you had cross-border coming in, and then you had Department for Transport and IOL putting band-aids on tumours. And then all of a sudden, you've got all these different regulations that are compounding, making it more confusing. But before cross-border, it was just 8 pages long, and then everybody understood it.
Look, all I'm turning around saying to you is that the way the business has gone, when I was a taxi driver, when I first started, the majority of the licensed vehicles when I worked in Basildon were Hackney. The world has changed, that not being funny, most of the cars now, if you just look at the Transport Department website, they're private hire. We take bookings. A lot of the taxis take bookings. In other words, they're doing private hire work. So in other words, a lot of the regulations that we're working under, the majority of the work that has been done by the taxi and private hire is in fact private hire work. In other words, if we're talking about how to control the trade and how we should be doing something and how it could work better, then we're actually coming back to the consultation done by the Law Commission, where it was recommended as a standard across that would give the benefit. Okay, originally it was a minimum standard across the board, but again, that's up for the political debate. But the point is, at least then, once you've got the same across the board, then you've got all the officers will understand it, or we've got a hope in that the councillors might be able to stand it, and the public might be able to understand it if it's simple enough. It should be simple enough. But with the way the regulations, I mean, we're also talking about, we have still got, for example, regulations going back to 1849, 1850 and 1851, which have never been repealed. But you wouldn't want flipping licensing officers to turn around and say, excuse me, why aren't you carrying a bag of hay in the back of your vehicle?
That's a myth. It's not in there.
Yeah,
if you check the
be,
1847 Act, there's nothing in there
yeah,
about
but I'm just turning around saying as an example. But there we go.
Well, let's be completely honest about it. I mean, the general public are never going to read these consultations. They're never going to understand these consultations. They're never going to respond to these consultations. They don't care. It's down to us, as drivers, as licensing officers, as licensing authorities, as the Department for Transport, as the Institute of Licensing. It's down to us to make sure things are done right. We can't rely on the general public understanding our job, because they never will. And that's the whole point of the consultations, because neither does the Department for Transport, with the greatest of respect, Paul. Neither does the Institute of Licensing, with the greatest of respect, John. They don't understand our role. They go into consultation to ask us to explain to them and to educate them of what our job actually is on the street. So please respond to the consultations. Des.
If I can just say, don't kill the messenger. This guy's in the civil service. I disagree wholeheartedly with what's in that consultation. He's in the civil service. The motivation behind all of this is
Just put the microphone to your mouth, please.
Central government. And they're wanting to get figures up. They're wanting to get more revenue in from VAT. They want drivers to have greater opportunity. They don't want the challenge of worker status. It's not this guy's fault. But it is going to absolutely cripple the industry for the small private hire operator.
Okay, very, very quickly, we've got Paul here, we've got John here, we've got Mike here. They haven't said a word yet, they've not been brought into anything yet, and we've still got a whole separate topic to get onto with these electric vehicles, the hydrogen and the green. So, please.
Well, could I ask a question? I know it's you guys that are supposed to answer the questions, not me. What do you actually want? And I say that because I come to no end of these kind of conferences and discussion groups and all the rest of it. And with all due respect to everybody here, I don't mean to be rude or upset anybody here, all we talk about is what happened 50 years ago, what happened 20 years ago, the 1848 Act and God knows what. That gentleman's right. Time has moved on. None of the legislation, hardly any of the regulations have even mentioned apps. Very few mention telephones, none mention mobiles, websites or anything else. So I think we need to drop the anchor here and decide what, as an industry, we actually want. And unfortunately, I might add, that's not going to be a very simple process, because a bit like farmers who need sun in that field and rain in this field, every town, every area, whether you're a day man, night man, whether you're a taxi driver or a private hire, probably all want something different. So it's not an easy situation. But I think, with the greatest respect to the DFT, they react to, they get pressure from the public, they get pressure from institutions, they get pressure from the industry, probably not enough. They get lots of different pressures from politicians and so on who think things are a good idea. But if somebody actually asked this industry, and I've mentioned this in many articles that I write, what do we actually want? Nobody's got the sheet of paper or the book or whatever it is to say, that's what we want. This is what would really work really well. And I think until we start thinking as an industry about what we want and what the next 10, 20 years is going to start looking like from the industry's point of view, frankly, I think you're dead in the water. And I think what you'll have is licensing officers ignoring you, enforcement officers not being able to do stuff, cross-border, whether it's a good idea or a bad idea, as is, Wolverhampton, everybody, they'll all do their own thing, because that's all they can do. Because none of it's very clear, nobody knows what they actually want. So I'd say, think about what you actually want. What does good look like? And when you thought about that, perhaps these guys will arrange a conference or a meeting or something where we actually committed to paper, and then we'll go and talk to the DFT and other people about what it should look like going forward. So my question is, what do you want?
To be fair, that's the question that's being asked by the DFT in the consultation. What do you want? John, quickly.
Thank you. I think we do have to look to the future. I don't agree with quite a lot of what's been said today. However, I agree with Mike. We've got to look to the future, not dwell on the past. There is no chance of a whole-scale law reform from what the minister said, but there are opportunities coming our way where collectively we can voice concerns, put matters forward that the government may wish to legislate on in the future. The starting point of that is the guidance. I have my views on that. Some of it's great, some of it needs tweaking, and everyone will put their views in. But no matter what organisation you work for, or what your background is, we're all here for the same thing, and that's to make sure the public get a good service, and that there's competition, healthy competition in the marketplace, and that people are regulated to make sure that those safe journeys take place with safe drivers. And we do hear of instances where that doesn't take place. But there's lots of scope, I think, in the next 12 months where lots of conversations can take place about reform. We've heard on the Levelling Up agenda, potentially for discussion in the future, is reducing the number of licensing authorities from 276 down to 80 to take into account upper tier and combined authorities, and not at district council level. That'll bring a whole-scale pile of change again. So there's an awful lot coming our way as an industry, as the regulated, as the regulators, and I just think we need to focus our attentions on those matters of the future. Thank you, Dave.
I think that answering your question, what do we want? I think we need to give the customer what they want. Then we will get what we want. The reason Uber has been successful, they gave customer what the customer wanted. And Uber kicked us in the goalies, simple as that. And we need to accept where did we go wrong and what do we need to fix. And we need to apply common sense. Living in the past, it ain't going to fix our problem.
Without upsetting you either, I'd say to you, define success, because I don't think Uber's been a success at all. Frankly, I think it's been a disaster. By any measure, if you said, well, the success is the number of trips they've done, fine, but who's going to open a restaurant and subsidise each meal by 60%? Who's going to build houses and sell them 60% cheaper than what they cost to build? No one. It was a mad scheme. They managed, good luck to them. Where they were successful was persuading people who should have known a lot better to pump loads and loads of money into something. What they did, they persuaded lots of finance people to pump loads of money in, knowing there was no route to profitability. And I'd predict going forward, now we're starting to see interest rates beginning to rise, and there's actually safe returns. The madness of the last 5 years, where VC companies were prepared to back anything with four wheels, is going to start to decline pretty rapidly. And I think that what you shouldn't underestimate is the people who run cab companies or drive cabs or whatever in this industry, because they've done pretty well. Over 5-7 years, whatever it is, most people have survived. Yeah, some have sold off to Visa and Take Me and people, but most have survived pretty well. With an onslaught of millions and millions of pounds. They've also got through COVID, and many of them are here today, and they're now rebuilding their businesses. And I think that people underestimate the strength of this industry and the loyalty of the customers and so on. I do agree with you that we need to decide what it is that customers want, speak to our customers, understand our customers, and provide what they want. But I think that if I was looking at which companies have been a success, I think it's probably the companies in this room and around the country, rather than Uber and their like, because I don't think they've been successful at all.
They have been successful in taking the work away from us and give customers what they wanted, cheap rides and availability ASAP. Now, I'm not saying they're financially successful, but they've been successful in giving us a good old kicking.
Yeah, I think we could have a meeting on our own about this, but what I would say is that they may have taken some customers at the margins, and in some places they might have been more successful than others. In most places, they've actually built their own work base. They've taken people off if you take London, they've taken people off the tubes and buses because they were cheaper than the tubes and buses if there was 3 or 4 of you travelling. And around the country, I think they've done quite a bit of that. And as they diminish, the numbers of private hire drivers will reduce because they were artificial. I mean, London had 50,000 private hire for years once licensing was put in place. 20,000 cab drivers, all worked fine. Service was pretty good. Busiest day of the year, you had problems, but generally it was pretty good. all of a sudden you've got 100,000 private hire drivers. They came in because they were being subsidised. This was new work. These people would never used minicabs, never used taxis before. And as the prices go up, as they're going to, because drivers' wages are going to go up, driver shortages and all the rest of it, those numbers will diminish again. So I disagree with you, but in a nice way.
Okay, so very briefly, we've got 2 more questions, and then we're going to have to move on to the second section, which is the move to electric, hydrogen vehicles, charging points, and things like that. And we've got Sam Harrison from JACU here, and we've got other people here that are waiting to come onto the stand for that section. So I've got Abdul. Are you still wanting to ask a question? No? Okay, so one last question then, and then if we can wind it, so 2 last questions. And then we'll wind this section up, okay?
I have no problem with Uber operating in our area, but as long as you operate on the same rules as we do. Now, you've got members of the Institute of Licensing who are not enforcing licensing. The Department of Transport, for the last 2 years, has been absent without leave. Now, like a lot of people, I'm a one-man band. I'll go out and I'll work. Now, I keep saying if someone will give me £1 billion a year, I can certainly do fares a lot cheaper. But I cannot. Now, what we want, and the gentleman there said it's off the cards, but why is it off the cards? We want a wholesale reform of the licensing laws in this country. Never mind the 1847 Acts. Let's get it all up to date, right? And the idea of cutting down to 80 licensing areas, who the hell thought of that? It's stupidity. It's bad enough as it is, right? We need the licensing authorities that are there to do the jobs. If they start doing the jobs, start interacting with the trade, and start enforcing, then perhaps we might get something done. But we need the likes of the Institute of Licensing to stop saying to the members, oh yes, you're very nice, we're all great, we'll take your money, but carry on being idiots. We need the Department of Transport to get off their backsides and start doing something.
A little bit blunt, but thank you very much. Okay, any responses? And then we've just got Jacqueline.
Well, whilst I totally disagree with you, sir, as to your interpretation of what licensing authorities are putting out, I'm with you totally that local authorities should be enforcing. There's no reason why they shouldn't. We are not a regulator of licensing authorities. We work with and for, and occasionally challenge licensing authorities, and we work with all aspects of the trade and government. Say again, sorry? Okay, but I think there have been difficult times for everybody in the last couple of years. I think there's lots been learnt from the experiences of where things have changed. I think there is, as I totally agree, there's a whole-scale need for reform. We had it handed to us with the Law Commission report. And we, unfortunately, for whatever reason, the government didn't take that up. But we're stuck with what we've got at the moment. The government have said they're not intending to legislate to wipe the slate clean and start again. So they're going to tinker with what we've got. There are some potential aspects coming forward for change in the future. And I think we've just got to continue to work together, make sure that government know what our main issues are, and bit by bit, let's hope for some positive change.
Can I just say one thing about licensing authorities? I deal with 70 licensing authorities across the country for one of my clients. And I have to say there's the good, the bad and the ugly. And, you know, some licensing authorities, I have to say, do an extremely good job. And I don't hesitate to say that, and I could provide evidence of it. Some do a job that's okay, and some do a fairly poor job. Some are what I would call regulators, some are what I would call administrators. And I think that we're kind of a bit stuck with that system at the moment. I also think that there's a difficulty for licensing authorities dealing with laws that don't deal with any of the things we've currently got, like websites, mobile phones, apps, I could go on and on and on. I think as well that licensing officers not being able to deal with like foreign cars, if you like, can only deal with the cars in their own area is a big issue. But I think that when we talk about wholesale change to law and regulation and so on, I do honestly come back to the point that if we don't know what we want at the other end, I mean, it could all be reviewed and could be a disaster. I mean, you could be sitting there next year telling us, oh, I want a review, but I didn't think it was going to be like this. Unless the industry engage with it, unless the industry actually knows what it wants, then you're just caught in another disaster. The Deregulation Act wasn't dreamt up by somebody in Whitehall. People were pushing for that because the previous system wasn't that great either. It was all based on case law, not law. Now we're not happy with that. So what do we want? I mean, I think politicians, I think the DFT and others can quite innocently come to us and say, every time you tell us you want something, we do it, and then we find that you don't want it. So I think we have to know what we want.
I think we just got the one last question from Jackie, was it?
Yeah, this is something that obviously this is a big issue, and again, it's come to the end and we can't actually give it the coverage it needs. But when you ask what the drivers want, one thing we keep overlooking, and one of the first comments on our licensing authority's consultation policy is all about driver safety, and I think that's what we need. If we can improve driver safety and bring in some national standards for our own safety, it would help with retaining more drivers, getting new people on board, working better with the licensing authority, and I think driver safety is something that we need to come back at another time in a bit more detail.
Okay, thank you very much. So we're going to quickly, and I do mean quickly, have a switch over because we've got Sean here from Car and Cab Care, we've got Cenex here, we've got Sam Harrison here from JACU, Clean Air Zones, and yep, Right, so we need to have a bit of a switch around on the stage, please, because we are rapidly running out of time. Thank you all for your input and for taking your time to answer the questions. Okay. Unfortunately, we're almost out of time overall anyway, so we need to keep this brief and we need to keep it fast. But there is a massive push for clean air zones, there's a massive push for electric vehicles, there's problems with charging points and charging infrastructure. So I'm going to hand over to the people on the stage. If you could introduce yourself, please, where you're from and what your speciality is. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sean Monell from Car and Cab. I've been an EV specialist for quite some time, ex-Cab Direct agents as well, so lots of experience in mobility, electric vehicles, and working on insurance and repairs of vehicles. So moving forward into the electric vehicles of the public hire, the way the industry is changing, it's just becoming uncost effective to actually meet the demands of disabled groups right now. So we've decided, we've done our marketing, we've realised what people can afford, and we've listened to the trade, and they want to feel secure. Majority of drivers who are in public hire now are wanting to feel secure because of the way the industry is changing. So we just made an electric car to service demands of what the trade are doing on a day-to-day basis on ranks, but also deal with the infrastructures of charging these vehicles from private hire and Hackney. So it doesn't matter to me whether an electric car is a Hackney or a private hire. But what does matter to me, because my background has always been public hire, so it's how do we get the public hire to be competitive with private hire, because in the next 3 years we won't have a public hire like we have now, because the services, the vehicles are getting older, parts are getting non-available. We've got to move away from the diesel without a shadow of a doubt at some point. So, we've got major problems with DPFs, with all the infrastructures of all these Euro 6 standards that we've got to meet. So how do we do it? So, you know, I came up with the solution of, okay, I've run an accident management company and supply electric cars across the UK. And when it comes to electric cars and they haven't got driveways, we're having to do these pads that you go to public displays where they're running cables underneath it. And I thought to myself, right, well, we need to have charging facilities now in place to move forward to the electric vehicles of the future. It's not a case of, is it going electric? It's 100% going electric. Even your hydrogen vehicles are electric. You know, they're all electric motors and batteries anyhow. So, you know, we came up with the eco charging solution to actually balance batteries, to charge vehicles slowly, to give electric vehicles a chance of actually lasting. So majority of electric cars that we sell, they can only rapid charge to 80%. So that's anybody which hasn't got a driveway at home. So I thought, how are we going to do that? The amount of people that we fund for cars right now, we say no to electric cars because they haven't got a driveway. And I want to be saying yes to these drivers. So that's why, is everybody seeing the eco charging solution down at the back of car and cab there? So it's a very simple contest. We've used a licensed product, which is an eco drain, which is a commercial, which is licensed, and we've made a pod. And we can stick that pod in between two houses, so the two households, two cars can charge at a very minimal cost and balance the batteries. So when it comes to our larger vehicles like transit, for instance, plug-ins and all the big cars, which are engine cars, which can drive all day, and it's given us an electric range so we can carry on driving all day and get great MPG. Or let's say if we go into London TfL, we can drive into London and put it into full EV and drive an EV and then drive back out. So it's how do we make this happen so the trade can move forward, because, you know, it's going to come a point that vehicles are going to get more and more and more expensive because the manufacturers are now pulling back their terms because they don't need to discount cars anymore. They can't adapt them, make them, I should say, fast enough now because of the way the infrastructures with the war and the batteries and the components to make these vehicles. So it's kind of like we're wasting time where we should be concentrating on getting these infrastructures in, especially while the vehicles are at the cheapest they're going to be for quite some time. Because we've been told that, you know, for the next 2 years, there's no big, massive bulk buying of cars no more. We can only order small amounts of cars each month and sell them before they even come into stock now, because there's nobody's going to have big, massive accounts of cars available. So if we don't balance batteries, we're going to have hot batteries and cold batteries when we go to rapid charging. So anybody who hasn't got a driveway and they're going to rapid charge these cars, it's only Ioniq 5 in EV6 that we sell that we can rapid charge to 100%. So all batteries are the same temperature because they're designed to do that. Where all the other brands, VW Group, Mercedes, you know, the list goes on, it's 80%. So we're only charging to 80%. Where people think, oh, I'm going to the petrol station, I'm going to get £20 of fuel. You can't do that in electric cars. You've got to balance your batteries, otherwise the batteries will fail in time, unfortunately. So it's getting the infrastructures right before we can move forward, really. Any questions?
So you've got the stand set up, haven't you, and the charging point set up. So if anybody wants to go and have a look at Sean, have a look at the infrastructure that he's set up and had approved and had licensed, please feel free to go and have a look at him, have a chat with him, because he's very, very informative and knowledgeable on this subject. Okay. Yep, Senex?
Cool. Yeah. So hi, Victor Lajona from Senex, and I'm a modeling analysis team leader there. So Senex is a non-profit research and consultancy organization, experts in low-emission transport. So we help companies decarbonize their transport operations. So it could be fleets, fleet operators. I mean, specifically in the taxi arena, we've worked with local authorities, for example, helping them with their licensing policies in terms of how to get that in place to reduce emissions within their councils and local authorities. That's kind of the stick side of it, and then the carrot side of things is what incentives should be in place for taxi operators, like for example, interest-free loans or charging infrastructure grants, etc. So working with the taxi trade, working with local operators, and helping them, have better policies in place to reduce emissions from, cutting all those emissions from idling, all diesel engines idling at doors of schools or hospitals or in city centres, where a lot of taxis operate. And then we've a couple of more things. So we also run a couple of hydrogen taxi projects. So in several European cities, London, Paris, Copenhagen, in Denmark, where there's around 200 taxis currently operating. They've been operating for around 3-4 years now, and in places, for example, in Paris, where there's a proper kind of hydrogen refueling infrastructure in place, they're working really well. So, for example, there, apart from other stations, they have a couple of refueling stations in the 2 major airports in the city. So hydrogen, I guess, as opposed to battery, it can give you a very long range, kind of similar to diesel or petrol, and you can refuel really quickly, as opposed to electric. But I guess more suited to perhaps motorway operations, where they're going, city centre onto the ring road, carrying passengers to the airport and back. So in those kind of situations where you have a refueling station in place in airports, it really gives a good, I guess, case for taxi operators up there, and the trial is going well. So and more refueling stations are being put in place. For example, in Paris in this case, and they're going to put more in London as well, for example. And then just to finish off, we're also running, for example, a wireless charging pilot project in Nottingham, the YSET project, where there's a few charging pods on the ground, and the vehicle obviously needs to get retrofitted with a pad as well. And for example, as the taxis are waiting on the rank, it could be for a few minutes at a time, as they move up the rank, there's several, I guess, charging pads where they can top up. And that's the kind of solution we've been looking at and trialing the last few months, and if it actually works, it will be probably rolled out in other places in the city and maybe other cities in the UK, to see how different duty cycles and see how different case studies for electric taxis could work. So just 3 examples of the kind of things we are involved in.
Okay, thank you, Sam.
Hello, I'm Sam Harrison. I'm from the Joint Air Quality Unit, which is the government unit basically to reduce nitrogen dioxide levels at roadside. That's why we exist. I'm an expert, so allegedly, in air quality, although, to be fair, there are scientists who put me to shame. However, certainly for the means of talking to you guys, and I talk to Dave, I talk to Ian, for instance, very regularly about issues within the industry and how air quality affects it. So my unit is working with local authorities to reduce nitrogen dioxide levels. We're probably most famously for most of you on clean air zones. We also work with Transport for London, although that is independent on the ULEZ. And also we look at significant amounts of non-charging measures. So the majority of funding for government on this area of reducing nitrogen dioxide levels has actually gone to non-charging. It hasn't been affected by charging drivers. Taxi, private hire, obviously one of the most affected groups by charging in clean air zones, because you are one of the groups which is affected in every single clean air zone, which I could go into detail about why, and I'm sure I'll probably get a question about why, and I'm quite happy to answer that, but effectively it's frequency of travel. I think that's probably about it, because I want to get on with questions, so I'll just pass on.
Hi everyone, I'm Amir Hassan. I'm the CEO of Minicabit. We're Britain's largest cab aggregator. I guess in terms of EVs, got a couple of perspectives. One is that, so we've offered zero emissions vehicles as an option on our platform to customers for many years. And during the lockdowns, we actually won some government funding to build out some tools for local operators to understand the kind of ROI they can get when investing in EVs. And things like how they can be priced to customers, how you can generate high value trips for EVs is an important factor. So a couple of things that we're launching this summer. One is an EV savings calculator. So for any kind of fleet, even if you're not on our platform, you can work out how many jobs you're doing, and we can show you how much you might be saving if you had done those jobs through EVs. And then secondly is, there's a lot of anxiety with EVs in terms of using them for long-range trips, out of town and airport trips, in terms of is there a charging point nearby. So we built some tools whereby, let's say if it's a 150-mile trip, we'll only present that quote to customers if there's a charging point near the destination of a certain type that reduces the downtime for drivers to be able to quickly charge up and come back, right? So we so one perspective is on how we can use tech to help operators generate the ROI when they're investing in EVs. And I guess the other perspective is just in terms of our own customer searches and the fact that we're the official partner for people like Heathrow and Booking.com and so on. We're getting a kind of, I suppose, an off-the-record perspective of how they see EVs being positioned in their future over the next sort of 5 years or so. And there is a kind of carrot and stick perspective that we all need to have about when we're investing in EVs. When is the right time, and what are the consequences if we try and hang on to fossil fuel cars for so long, right? And I can probably add some perspective on that.
Okay, thank you, Amber. So I think what we can safely put here from the discussions here is that the biggest push, the biggest concern, the biggest worry is cost and range. Okay? We can hear from everybody here that there are steps being put in place, there are measures being put in place for the technology and the provisions that are being provided for you is trying to catch up with what we need as an industry. But at the same time, we as an industry need to catch up and realise that EVs and hydrogen and alternative fuel vehicles are coming. We need to be ready, and we need to be aware of the measures that are being put in place by AMA, by Joint Air Quality Unit, by Cenex, by Sean. Sean's done a lot of work to create and provide and make sure that those people that couldn't have the facilities to charge at home now can. So what are your concerns? What are your issues that you have? We know that we've still got people with lots of flats and things like that, but even with them, there are measures being put in place. Now, I'm going to throw it open for questions and answers, but I'm very conscious of the fact that we've already overrun by 20 minutes anyway. But more importantly, the draw for the cars at 3 o'clock. So, come on, get your questions out. Anybody? Anyone? Okay, Clinton. Ah, there we go. I thought I was going to have to do all the talking myself for a minute there.
Yeah, unfortunately, mine's more of a question for the people here as opposed to the people who are giving the presentations.
That's okay.
I work at a local authority at Reading Borough Council.
Right.
And one of the things that we have put out recently, and more than once, is to move to smaller EV vehicles, because there appear to be more of them about for sale. But operators don't want to move into a smaller vehicle fleet. So what's stopping you, I suppose?
Okay. There's a few things actually that's stopping us within how the nature of the industry itself. I mean, we had reason to address consultations with local authorities where they were trying to remove MPVs, for example, from being licensable. We need to understand that if you're sending a saloon vehicle to pick up mum, dad and 2 kids, but actually they've got 3 kids, you've then got a problem if you're only in a small vehicle, whereas if you've got an MPV, that job is perfectly doable. You've also got the problem as well, as I'm sure Sean will explain, that a lot of the larger vehicles now becoming EV, you take away a lot of the floor pan underneath because of the size of the battery. Is that right, Sean? So that actually creates a problem to be able to convert those into wheelchair accessible vehicles. But it's about the range, it's about the luggage capacity, it's about the nature of the industry as it stands, the number of people that you pick up. The amount of times you turn up to do a job in a 4-seater vehicle and you get 5 people. I booked this taxi, I'm sorry, I can only take 4. Well, what are you going to do? We're all here, we're all getting in. So that's why a lot of people have moved over onto the MPV type size vehicles. Plus, it's safer for the passenger. I mean, do you want to tell mum and dad with 3 kids that they've got to split up and go into 2 separate vehicles when there's actually MPVs that are perfectly fit to do that job? Do you want to tell them that they've got to pay for 2 vehicles when they can do the same job in one and save them money as well? So it's about catering for the public and the public needs. So I see what you're saying, that there is far more smaller EVs that are available, but those smaller vehicles aren't necessarily fit for purpose for the licensing industry. So just bear with 1 second while we get a mic to you.
I've got 2 EVs. I'm looking to get a 3rd one. I'm getting rid of my diesels over the next 2 years, replacing them with EVs, and they're totally fit for purpose.
The small ones?
I've got, at the moment, a Nissan Leaf. I just bought 2 months ago, brand new MG5. The MG5 is doing an average 300 miles a day, up and down Heathrow and stuff, no problems.
Yeah, but the MG5 is the estate vehicle, isn't it?
Yeah,
yeah.
They are fit for purpose.
Yeah.
They're totally fit for purpose. They take 4 passengers, and they're totally fit for purpose. The Nissan Leaf is a bit cosy for 4. The MG5, 4 passengers, no problem.
So what do you do if you get mum, dad and 3 kids? You've then got 5 passengers. That's what I'm saying.
Well,
for the majority, they may well be fit for purpose.
That's not our problem. When they book, they should say, our operators ask them how many passengers. If they can't count how many they've got, that's their problem, not ours.
Yeah, I get that completely, but what I'm saying is that you have to have that range. I'm not saying that a smaller vehicle isn't fit for purpose at all. I'm saying that an MPV is also fit for purpose for different requirements.
We're getting them coming on the road now. You've got the Mercedes on the road. You've got the ID Buzz coming on the road. The ID Buzz long range, I think, is 18 months, isn't it, Gary? That's going to be on the road, though I do believe it's going to be a bit pricey at the beginning, probably about 60k. But then again, when you look at the savings you're getting on fuel and stuff, at the moment, my MG5, my driver's saving around 180, 190 pound a week on diesel. So the savings are colossal.
Yep. There.
One of the reasons for asking, and of asking of our trades, is because, I mean, when I'm out and about in a town, and I manage our team at Reading, and I like to feel I'm quite active, so I am out and about. We do a lot of enforcement work. When you're speaking to drivers, the average customer is maybe 1 or 2 people at any one time. It's not actually very often you see a full car of people being transported anywhere. So it seems to me that there's an industry out there which isn't being exploited enough in maybe the smaller car. But trying to get our trade to recognise it and move it forward has been quite difficult. So I just wondered, are there other local authorities where maybe smaller vehicles are licensed and moving into that trade? And that was, I suppose, my question really.
Well, yeah, and thank you for the question. I mean, I did come across one local authority that had a smaller vehicle, and because it was a smaller vehicle, they would only license it to carry 3 passengers, because in their opinion, the seat wasn't big enough. So if you get 4 rugby players in there, it's not going to be big enough. So it's about that common sense approach. And as I said to start with, the industry is changing. The vehicles that are available are changing. The nature of the job is changing. The nature of the fueling systems is changing, and we all need to adapt with it. Sean?
What small vehicle are you talking about?
Our criteria that we license vehicles on is basically using the NCAP rating system. So we will license large family vehicles, large MPVs. What we don't license at the moment is a small family car. And I've been putting it out there, you know, we're happy to license a small family car. If someone wants to take this forward, we want to push our electric vehicles. Our problem is that there doesn't seem to be an appetite to go for a smaller car because the potential for having the 4, 5, 6 people. But in actual fact, most journeys are only taken by 1 or 2 people. So it just seems a bit of a conundrum for us, that's all.
Can I ask you why you don't license smaller cars? And the reason I ask that question is because when you go through London, you see TfL licensed vehicles as a smart car. You can't get much smaller than that.
Well, David,
right?
I can give you an example.
Yeah, but they are licensed smaller cars. That's the question. Why?
It's down to licensing authority. There has to be a minimum width.
Yeah.
To license for carry 4 people. So if they change, then perhaps they will see smaller cars.
Yeah.
Well, the manufacturers are pulling away from smaller cars because it's not cost effective because of the infrastructures of the materials used. So they're all going for larger cars. But the problem is with the larger cars, they haven't got the range and then we can't afford them. So then they have to go to a plug-in. And that's where we've got the transits out there. So, you know, we've got to have a criteria for all vehicles, not just one, and deal with the range anxiety, because that's the biggest problem of the drivers is they don't seem to understand the differences from plug-ins electric vehicles and full electric vehicles and hybrid. It's trying to educate them. Every time that we're selling a car, I have to make sure that we know that what they're buying, because even likes of Black Horse Finance and all these finance companies, they think, oh, this is not fit for purpose, it doesn't do this, it doesn't do that. So, you know, there's a few of my drivers in there today, and they see we do all the YouTube videos and we explain how these cars and how to get the range, and we're trying to educate the drivers to drive better, safer, slower, and charge up, because they're all dynamos. But likes of electric cars in general, Hackney drivers are the perfect ones for electric vehicles because they're constantly at the ranks, slowing down, at the ranks, slowing down, and they have got the best opportunity to get the best out of those vehicles. But the problem is a lot of councils aren't using standard vehicles as Hackneys, whereas you've got your airport services, you've got your school contracts, you know, and it's kind of like, you know, we've even got airport services on plug-in hybrids, and they're charging 2 to 3 times a day. And they may live right next to Manchester Airport in Salford, for instance, and they're driving on electric all day, and it's a plug-in. So it's using a vehicle and understanding the product when they're buying it to make them understand how to get the best out of it. You know, you're dead right about the MG5. It's spot on. It's value for money, what you said before. But yeah, but yeah. Yeah, we sold loads of them. We did 300 of them last year. It was our best-selling electric car. However, it's only a car that you can rapid charge to 80%. So if you haven't got the facilities at home, it's very problematic. So, yeah.
But that's still giving you 160 odd miles, 180 miles.
Yeah.
It's doing 220 real miles a day, and our drivers rapidly charge it once a day. The downside to it is if you do 6 or 7 rapid charge, then you do have to do a 7 kilowatt charge on it too. But that's the same with all of them. I say it's totally fit for purpose, whether it's private hire or Hackney.
I agree they're fit for purpose. It's trying to get the mentality of a normal diesel driving taxi with range anxiety. That's the problem, is moving these people. The people who have been in hybrid cars, they're ready, they're signed up. You know, if you've got the infrastructures in ready, they're ready to go, and they will listen and learn.
Yeah, but that's part of education, isn't it? Like when I got my Nissan Leaf, I panic about going to Stansted, innit?
Yeah.
But once you've done it, I've taken it across to bloody Germany now on holiday. It's only got real miles of 145 miles, the Nissan Leaf.
Well, we drove 7 electric cars here all the way on one charge with no issues at all. And we actually charged up 10 miles in the MG5, 5 miles in the basic 58 kilowatt Ioniq 5, and 10 miles in the 73. But if you're sensible, yes, you can charge up on the motorway by putting it onto cruise control, setting it, and then literally every hill you charge up going down. There's ways of doing it, but making the drivers listen and understand the products, because the same thing is in with EVs. If you don't drive an EV hybrid properly, you waste an electric. And our normal drivers, they accelerate hard and brake hard, and they're wasting power all the time. So it's how do we actually teach these people to drive better?
It's money that will work for them. The more money they save, the better they'll drive.
Yeah, I agree. I'm all for it. Yeah.
Okay, yep.
Yeah, and I think also we started to move from range anxiety to charging anxiety. So when looking for a public charge point, being able to know if it's not broken, if it's actually working, and if it's not busy, or even worse, if it's not being occupied by someone with a diesel or petrol car, which it happens, unfortunately. So I think there's work to do. First of all, I guess standardizing and unifying all the charge point operators into better ways or easier ways to pay for the charging. Just make it easy to pay with a card, like contactless, something like that. And also a good platform, I think, to tell you in advance if that charge point is busy, or even better, to book it in advance, obviously with some limits, like you have to arrive there maybe in 15 minutes or something like that, with some sensible limits. But that kind of work needs to be done. It's already happening, luckily, but especially for taxis, if they really need to top up with a rapid charge during the day, they need to have that reassurance that they're gonna be able to do it, and not just have to go really far to do it, or just have to cut their day short because of it. So I know there's, I think some councils are trying to put and have already put some kind of public charging infrastructure in place dedicated to taxi and private hire.
Give them a card, don't they? So if you haven't got the card, you can't use the machine. So
Yeah, but also no other EV users could use those charge points because they're just for taxi drivers.
Yeah. So they insert a card that they get issued by the local authority.
Yeah,
exactly. If they haven't got that card, it won't work.
Yeah, exactly. And there's some of those measures being put in place, but there's not many EV taxis around yet. So imagine when this starts to creep up, obviously the infrastructure needs to follow on, or even better, it needs to be in place before.
Well, there have been a lot of webinars and online meetings and forums with the grid suppliers and the EV charging point suppliers. They've explained how the use of these machines will be limited. If it's for taxi use only, then you would need to have a Hackney badge in order to be able to use it. If it's for private hire use only, you would need to have a private hire badge in order to be able to use it. You create that account, you can only do that, create that account with a valid badge number. There's all sorts of things that are going in place, but something that you just touched on there that isn't being addressed by this is a driver of a diesel car that just parks on there thinking it's a parking space and then it's blocked. So it's a very valid point that you raised, that maybe there should be some kind of infrastructure that you can pre-book, and it will warn you if that slot is preoccupied by somebody else, or maybe put barriers on there so that you can only go onto that charging point if you've pre-booked it, in which case the barrier lowers for you to get on. But these are all things that we all, as planners, as developers, as charging infrastructure installations come across, they need to work on with us as well, because it is changing, it is coming. The question is, how do we deal with it?
Well, Dave, we've actually got a DC rapid charging hub for our trade. And we don't actually need it yet because everybody that we supplied electric cars have got driveways. However, we've got 250 DCs and a 122 AC, so a 3-car charger. So it's literally just for public hire and private hire. And we're not going to stipulate one to the other because they're both the same in my eyes. It's just a different method of work, how they get the work. We haven't connected it for one reason, because the substation in our building has not got the power to power those and our buildings. So what we've decided to do, instead of upgrading the substation, wasting another £100,000, we've decided to go solar and battery power. So we're literally charging the garage, running off pure solar panels, battery storage, and if it hasn't charged up, then we charge up at night time where it's half electric, and then we use the electricity to charge the vehicles correctly. And you know, with likes of these facilities, then okay, the 22 AC is like for your plug-in size cars or your 7 kilowatts, as they can stay there, but the rapids will not be able to be left. If you've got a 150 DC and you've got Ioniq 5 or EV6, for instance, you can charge in 18-20 minutes anyhow. But if we don't rapid charge, if we do rapid charge and then we do not go up to 100%, that's the danger in long term for your batteries. It's okay for short, and like so the MG5, which was our best electric selling car last year, they stipulate that the balance of batteries must be 3 to 4 times a week. That's the problem.
Okay, very quickly, Arma, and then we're going into the audience.
My name is
one second.
Sorry. So, just to quickly add, first of all, I commend you for how you're taking the plunge and investing in the EVs and how you're using them. There's a lot of... so I was here last September. I remember speaking to you, Sean, actually, about how many cars are coming out. Just think about how much has changed in those sort of 9 months, right? You're seeing, ID4, MGs, so many cars coming out on the street. That's the first point. The second point is, after that event in September, we had the fuel crisis at the time, and then fuel prices have gone up, and the war, and so on and so on, right? Some of these factors aren't going to go away in the next couple of years, and I think what's changed is, EV was before a kind of nice, considerate COP26 sort of nice to have. Now the economics are pretty stark, right? If you look at the cab price from central London to Stansted, it's almost £100, even on the ride-hailing apps. It's probably more than the cost of the flight, right? So you've got, no doubt, premiums because of driver shortages and things like that, but any opportunity to use EVs efficiently, so at a quarter of the cost of fuel prices, if that's reflected in bringing price points within reach of more customers, that's a good thing, right? Because if we don't do that shift, you're going to start cutting out different parts of society who just simply cannot afford a cab, and that's before VAT hits industry as well.
Okay, thank you. Into the audience.
Hi, my name is Dave Colligan from Liverpool City Council. I'm head of vehicle standards and head up vehicle testing and inspection. To answer my colleague's question, I think what we learned many years ago is you set a set of standards for your vehicles, and you let the business dictate. So basically, you should have set a standard size of seat for whatever 16-inch per seat or whatever your standards are. And market forces determine who comes in, whether it's a Nissan Leaf from the colleague here or an MG5. You cannot have an exhaustive list of vehicles that one fits all. You have to let the trade dictate to your standards as opposed to vice versa. And the second point, which is a massive point, I'm sure Sean will agree, because I work closely with Sean on many different issues, is any Hackney manufacturer coming through now, mainstream, full type approved Hackney with a silo wheelchair is going to get harder and harder to build due to no drill zones, due to a number of different reasons. As Euro 6 progresses, it's going to get harder and harder to build what is a conventional type approved Hackney. LEVC are there at the moment. There's other companies talking about doing it, but no one's come forward yet with a side load and wheelchair access vehicles. I know my colleagues here from the DFT, and I missed part of their last talk, but I've been in many consultations with them sitting next to me. And my big concern is the future of the Hackney trade is going to be massively impaired by a basic impossibility to build side load and wheelchair vehicles with full type approval.
Yeah, couldn't agree with you more. Yep. Okay, any other questions? Yep, the frontier.
Yes, I wanted to ask.
Sorry.
Sorry. Okay. I wanted to ask. I've seen electric vehicles with different chargers. Are they going to standardize these chargers, or is it Tesla's going to have their own type of charging? Nissan something else? Are we going to end up with a Betamax and VHS situation?
From what I heard last year, and on the panel, correct me if I'm wrong, Tesla were going to open up their charging network for all EV vehicles. Now that was supposed to be something that was it November last year?
Yeah, it is happening. Yeah.
It started in the UK, already started in Europe, and it's starting in the UK in some locations. Yeah.
Yeah, so that is coming. So it's going to be that there will be a standard. On the frontier.
Yeah, in Plymouth, all private hire and Hackney have to be electric vehicles by 2030. They celebrate they're getting all these grants from government for putting chargers in, but they seem to be reluctant in putting in rapid chargers. So is there any government pressure to actually get them to put the rapid chargers in?
There we go, Sam. Finally, we get to hear your voice.
Not my specialist area, but something I do know a little bit about. So certainly under the scheme we're doing it under is the local EV infrastructure scheme, and that is basically locally directed. I think the important point, I think a couple of people said it around the room today, is making the trade voice heard with the officials, with the people who are doing the planning. What do you actually need? And actually going to the councils and making that point. I'm sure your licensing officers would be more than happy to pass on your concerns to the planning officers when these things are being dealt with. But if they're not, there's nothing to stop you as a citizen just going to the planning office and making the point to them. I mean, Dave said it earlier as well about the importance of these consultations. And to some extent, I couldn't agree with you, obviously, officially, but the public on the whole are not as likely to engage with something as you are. You are all directly affected by this. So by 2030, we're going to be looking at the phasing out of petrol and diesel vehicles. Yes. It's a lot of people are worried about this, but it doesn't mean second-hand vehicles. They'll still continue probably for the next 30, 40 years after that, really. So if my father lives long enough to keep going with his classic collection. But, you're at that point at the moment where you need to be influencing. You need to be saying there, we have this definite need, and make sure your voice is heard. And I know, Dave, and I've spoken to other people in the trade like Ian, who speak very, very coherently for your trade and are making these points locally themselves. You've got to be yourselves also getting in there and having those conversations with people about that absolute need that you've got. But I'd be the first to admit it's never easy. I'm not sitting there pretending this is some magic wands, but if you don't start talking about it, you find yourself left behind. So the funds are there. Government are providing a lot of funds. Government are also providing a lot of funds for rapid charges as well. But those decisions are very much driven by where the people who are making that planning decision understand that those requirements are needed. So that's really, as much as anything, you'll need to make sure your voice is heard, through councillors, through planning, whatever.
I think we can add to that as well, is that it's if you put in rapid charges and how many you can do and how much infrastructures of power is available. And it tends to be in likes of the supermarkets with the big car parks at the moment, where a lot of councils now are aiming to have charging hubs in an 8-mile radius where people can leave cars. It's not dealing with the 100% charging issue with our trade. However, that seems to be the direction that the councils are pushing now, because they've got to make money to put these things in. The bigger the charger, the more expensive it is. So when it goes into electric chargers in most areas, and we got rapid chargers, they tend to be like 50, 60 kilowatts, like in Liverpool city regions where we come from. Nobody's got any 150s or 100 DCs unless you're going onto the mainstream motorways. So it's kind of like how much infrastructure is needed to power these vehicles and how many chargers that we can physically get. And it is the only places where is the big supermarkets where they've got plenty of power. It seems to be going in that direction at the moment.
And did you say...
Yeah. No. Well, we've paid £100,000 for our two 150s and a 20, so it's a 3-car unit. And then we altered the car park and we put all the bays in and stuff. So, you know, the whole lot connect is probably about 120,000 quid. But I haven't done it to make money. I've done it to knock my tax bill down and also to allow our trade to use those services 24/7.
Okay. Mike at the back, this is the final question because it is now 2:45. We are seriously over. The car's been done in 15 minutes, ladies and gentlemen. So, Mike, then we'll carry on.
I love the fairy tale that's coming from the front. But
Sorry, say that again?
The fairy tale that's coming from the front, but while us dinosaurs are still on diesel. The one thing that everyone's overlooking, and the lads who are saving money at the moment on electric, well done. Personally, I'm looking for hydrogen myself, so I think that'll give us a better range, especially for the hack trade. But once those dinosaurs aren't using diesel, where's the government going to get the money from the trade that they're going to lose?
To be fair, that's the government's problem. If we're saving money, that's all that matters, isn't it?
We are now. We won't be in the future.
Sam?
More than my job's worth. But yeah, I mean, it's no denying. Obviously, there is a serious, there is going to be a difference in how things are taxed. I mean, obviously, as a trade, you provide a number of different taxes, and it's something the government will have to look into over the coming decades. But it's a treasury issue, and as anyone will tell you who works with government, you don't step on the toes of the treasury. They will have to look at it. But yeah, it is.
I would be very, very mindful of making the observation to government that they might lose money by us moving on to electric and hydrogen at the same time as we're asking them to provide funding for the charging points and the clean air zone upgrades. Do we really want to say, well, give us some money, but then you're going to lose money? No, let's just focus on the grant funding for now. Let's focus on getting the support to do the upgrades that are necessary. But yeah, you're right, they are going to lose money after. But that doesn't leave this room, okay? It's a secret. And with that, thank you very much to everybody for attending. Thank you very much for your questions. I'd like to thank the panel for spending their time to come and answer your questions for you. Thank you very much.